Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our spring semester of the Wednesday, what formerly was called the Lunch and Learn class because we would serve lunch. We're looking very much forward to serving you lunch once again. Hopefully, sooner than we think, we'll be able to do our live classes as well. But as I've been mentioning, we'll continue to do it on Zoom as well for all of those that have joined our classes from out of the area, out of the neighborhood, out of the state, and out of the country. So we have been studying in this Wednesday afternoon class the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is the fifth of the five books of Moses. It's a different style book than the first four in that it is all Moses talking. Moses is speaking from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. And it's taking place very, very soon before Moses will leave this world. So they're literally on the side of the Jordan River about to enter into the land of Israel. Moses will say his farewell over there. But before he does, he has his final message. And the message is not just to the Jewish people alive at that time, but the messages to Jews of all of history. Moses is speaking to us, and he's giving us the mission statement, what we're all about, why we're here, what we're here to do, what we're here to accomplish. He'll review many of the mitzvot, many of the commandments of the first books of the Torah. He'll add additional mitzvot that God had told him to put into the Torah as well. And he will give his own feelings, his own emotions into giving us the inspiration that we need to carry it forward from generation to generation, come what may, no matter what difficult times come to us, we will survive as a people, we will survive as a nation, and we will survive as a chosen people. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to put up on the screen two verses. This comes from chapter 10 of the book of Deuteronomy. They're verses 17 and 18. That's where we're up to. And again, the subject is the chosen people, the mission of the chosen people, our relationship with God, our relationship with fellow man. Verse 17. For the Lord your God is God of gods and the Lord of the lords, the great, mighty, and awesome God, who will show no favor, nor will he take a bribe. He executes the judgment of the orphan and the widow, and he loves the stranger to give him bread and clothing. Those are the two verses that we're going to focus on today. So let's begin with the words, nor will he take a bribe. What type of bribe might we think God would consider? So Rashi, the great biblical commentator, says simply, to appease him with money. You can't appease God with money. God will not be bought off with money. This is rather puzzling, because why would we entertain the idea that God could be bought off with cash? Why would money appeal to God? And what's he going to do with the money? And how we're going to get the money to him? Does he have a Swiss account? How do you deposit money for God? And what does God need our money for? Whatever he could buy, he could create. He's God. He's infinite. So what possible meaning could there be? Don't try to bribe God with money because you can't. He won't accept it. And we can understand all too well, the instruction of the Torah when the Torah speaks to judges, and the Torah says, don't take a bribe, for bribes blind even the wise and perverts the words of the otherwise righteous. We understand that, because once you're bribed, you lose your objectivity. And we understand that a human being could be tempted to accept a bribe, and therefore their objectivity might suddenly change because of the bribe. But that's talking about a human being. Here Moses is speaking about God, and he's saying, you can't bribe God, as if we thought we could. Did Rashi really believe that people might think that they can bribe God with a couple of dollars so that Moses needs to warn us against such a notion? And the answer is, I imagine most of you can understand, that we're not talking about bribing God, giving God money. If you look at the continuation of the verse, for the Lord your God is a God of God, the Lord of the Lords, the great, mighty, and awesome God, who will show no favor, nor will he take a bribe. But it continued. He executes the judgment of the orphan and the widow, and he loves the stranger to give him bread and clothing. There's a hint there in that second verse as to what Moses was referring to when he said, God cannot be bribed. Because if the second verse says that God loves the stranger and that he wants us to support the stranger, he wants us to support the poor, he wants us to give to those who do not have, to give them bread and to give them clothing, as the verse says. We may conclude, if God loves the stranger, if God cares for the orphan and the widow, if God cares for the poor, I can grease God's palm here with some money, not giving money towards God's summer home, but money that I'm going to share with those that God cares about. Because he just told me he cares about the poor, he cares about the stranger, he cares about the widow, he cares about the orphan. Okay, now that I know who God cares about, I'm going to give them money because God wants me to. But it'll be with a little blink of the eye. God, I'm kind of doing what you want me to do. So now I'm asking you to do what I need you to do. So I'm going to give charity. I'm going to give lots of charity. But God, overlook my other faults. After all, I'm helping those that you love so much. Now, obviously, God wants us to give charity. He cares very much about our charity, and he will bless us for the charity that we give. And God tells us over and over and over, you can challenge me with this, you can test me with this to see that if you give charity, indeed, I will bless you with wealth. But that doesn't mean you can bribe God by sinning in one aspect of your life and say, please overlook that part of my life, because look what I'm doing. I'm bribing those you care about. See, some people believe that you can bribe God this way. They overlook their unethical behavior and they assume that God, who represents truth, will overlook their behavior. So they become big, wonderful philanthropists, admired by many institutions, by hospitals, by universities, by organizations for their charitable work. And they serve on many important boards and they can be leaders of many initiatives, yet in their personal life, they can be rather dishonest, deceitful, and crooked. Some of you may have heard the news today of the passing of one such individual who was known for his philanthropy. And yet, as we found out, he was from the most dishonest people this country ever got to know. Comes Moses and tells us that God does not take any bribes, not even charity bribes. Maimonides gives us another interpretation to this verse. He says that Moses is referring to bribery, not through money, but bribery through religious observance. And again, some people think that since they're quote unquote very religious, they're very observant, they're saturated with mitzvot, they do all the mitzvot in the book, that God will overlook a dishonest act because after all, look at me, I do so many other good things. So Moses the Clear says, Maimonides, that God does not take any bribes, not even religious bribes. So when we reflect on both of these commentaries, Rashi and Maimonides, and they're living in the 11th and 12th centuries, they're addressing two different types of people that are still very much alive in the 21st century. There are individuals who believe that since they pray 3 times a day, and since they study every day, and they study from the Torah, since they're pious and they're meticulous in their religious observance, since they'll never eat something non-kosher, they'll never miss putting on tefillin, that God is automatically on their side. And if they cheat a little bit here in business, not so honest when it comes to money, God will overlook it because, after all, look at me, I'm a religious individual. To these people, Maimonides comes and says that that's what Moses is addressing. That all the mitzvot in the world won't eliminate the fact that you're behaving wrongly. That doesn't get erased. One doesn't erase the other. One doesn't negate the other. You know, the Talmud says an interesting thing. The Talmud says that when a person leaves this world, let's say it's after 120 years, and they make their way to the heavenly world, and they come to heaven, there is a case, a court case that takes place about your life. You have an attorney and there's a prosecutor, and they're determining what's going to be with your soul. Says the Talmud, they have a list of questions. There are standard questions that they ask everyone. Then they'll get personal. There's an opinion that they put on a videotape, and the videotape is a videotape of your life, and they go through different days of your life. That's not just a Hollywood film that actually comes from Jewish sources that you get to watch your entire life. Not always so pleasant, but they'll videotape the good things you've done as well. But before they get to the videotape, there is the standard questionnaire. And in the standard questionnaire, the first question that they ask is Nasasa benasato be'amuna. You know what that means? Did you behave honestly in business? You imagine the Talmud is saying to us that the very first question that we're going to be asked after we come to the heavenly world is, were we honest in business? When a person is being escorted to their final judgment, that's what they ask. Did you conduct yourself properly? Did you conduct yourself with faith when you were involved in business transactions? Were you only religious in the religious element of life? Or did you utilize the book of Torah to influence every part of your life, even when you were in the office? Were you honest? Did you conduct your business affairs properly? Did you have faith not just when you sat in the synagogue, but were you a man or a woman of faith in the office as well? That's Judaism as well. Judaism is not just when you're involved in the ritual. Judaism is the entire life. Many people perceive Judaism to be the set of laws relating to blessings, and there's holidays, and there's Passover, and there'll be Rosh Hashanah, and we blow the shofar. A lot of rituals between man and God. But Judaism is more than a religion. Judaism is a way of life. A person must act Jewish in everything he or she does. Did you know that 1/4, 25%, of the entire code of Jewish law, called the Shulchan Aruch, discusses the proper Jewish behavior in the workplace and in the business world? 25% of our laws are dealing with business ethics. You know, if you look throughout the Torah, you'll see a constant juxtaposition between the ritual commands of Judaism and the ethical obligations between one human being and another. One verse may say, don't eat milk and meat together, and the other verse will say, don't cheat, don't misrepresent, don't engage in fraud, because they're all part of the same religious structure. Acting ethically and acting honestly is not just another precept in Judaism. It's paramount to us understanding Judaism. Yes, my Shabbat is God's business. My food is God's business. And my work ethic is God's business. And it's sad that we don't always see this way. You can view someone eating a cheeseburger on Yom Kippur. And even a non-religious Jew may be a bit outraged by it. Okay, you don't, on Yom Kippur itself, to have milk and meat and eat it together. But the same God who said no to cheeseburgers on Yom Kippur is the same God who said no to eating on Yom Kippur, and also the same God that said no to dishonesty, no to lying, and no to cheating. It's all the same God. Ever since the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve were expelled and forced to work the land, earning a living and pursuing one's own wealth has become the single task that has occupied most of humanity. You realize that? Since Adam and Eve were sent out of the Garden of Eden, that's what takes up most of our existence. That's what takes up most of humanity's existence: earning a living, a job, a career, a business. And therefore, the Torah is going to focus in on that which will take so much of our lives and so much of our energy and so much of our focus, and say, there is an honest way to do this. No wonder that so much of the Torah focuses on proper conduct and religiosity when it comes to the workplace. Because the inclination for the desire for wealth, the desire for money is perhaps the strongest inclination that we have, and perhaps the most difficult one to control. It's a desire that can never be satisfied, no matter how much it's fed. It's never fulfilled. It never says, I have enough. Physical weakness and old age doesn't lessen the drive. It continues and continues to the last day of life, to the last breath. You never hear anyone say, I'm not in the mood to make money. You never hear anyone say, not now, I have a headache, when it comes to money. As the rabbis say, he who has 100 wants 200. You're never satiated. You never say, I'm full. I've eaten enough when it comes to money. And that's why the Torah surrounded our business day and our business life with over 100 mitzvot. In all of the mitzvot of kosher, of all the different aspects of kosher, there are 28 mitzvot in the Torah that are connected to it. There are 11 mitzvot in the Torah that are connected to gossip and to slander. There's over 100 connected to business ethics. So you see where God is putting all these warning signs. It's because there's a reason why we have to be on guard. Now, God could have asked us not to pursue a living altogether. Now, it may have been nice. This manna experiment in the wilderness of God putting food down from heaven, it would have been nice, right? We live in the wilderness. We're taken care of by God. He gives us food every day so we don't have to work for food. He provides for us everything that we need. But he didn't choose that. After the 40 years, which is now the transition point where we're up to in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses is now speaking to the Jewish people, they're about to not just cross the Jordan and enter into the Holy Land, the Promised Land, the land of Israel. They're about to change every aspect of their lives from a 40-year period of God providing to now self-providing. You will need to provide for yourself. And therefore, you're going to be involved in the workplace, and the workplace will have temptations. And that's why Moses over and over will warn us and tell us, be careful. And not just do I want you to behave honestly, I want you to teach the world how to do so honestly. I want you to be the lampposts, the banner for the world, to teach the world this is the way one conducts themselves in the business world. Judaism wrote the book on business ethics, and we should be and we must be the light unto the nations when it comes to honesty and when it comes to integrity. My father of blessed memory told me that he had heard from an eyewitness. When they came to America, those who survived, they spent a great deal of time trying to find out what happened to their family. Some of them found out sooner, some of them took some time, but they wanted to find eyewitnesses who were there in their hometown to know what happened to each member of their family. This is before Google, before internets, and so it was a difficult time. There were organizations that were set up collecting information, trying to put people together. It's hard to imagine what it's like to come to this country all alone and trying to find research about siblings and parents and uncles and aunts. And so he told me that he found someone that was in his city, his hometown city of Chmelnik in Poland, that was there the day the Nazis invaded. And he shared with my father that they rounded up all the Jews. And their first act was to bring all the men to the town square, which was just a few blocks from his house, and to humiliate the Jews by cutting off their beards. There's many photos of Nazis cutting off the beards, especially of the Hasidim, knowing how important this was to Hasidic life as part of their look. And so they took joy in humiliating the Jews by cutting off their beards. And this was a very painful and emotional experience. And so this eyewitness tells my father that when it came to your father, he's saying, my grandfather, that my grandfather put up a fight, that he put up a resistance he didn't want to let. And immediately the revolver came out to beat him, and if he would not comply, to kill him. And he said a Polish police officer jumped in and said, leave him be, let him live, let him live. And he used the words as an ehrlich Yid. He's an honest Jew. He's a fine Jew. Which meant that somehow in my grandfather's life, he served as a role model for this non-Jewish Polish police officer, to the point that this Polish police officer risked his life to spare my grandfather a few days of living. As an ehrlich Yid, he's an honest Jew. He only lived a few days after that. Ultimately, his fate was with the rest of the 6 million. But for my father to hear that in the last moments of life, a Gentile called out, "Er's an ehrlich Yid," he's an honest Jew. That for my father was a message to him coming from his father. Live your life with honesty. And the world will learn, the world will watch, the world will be inspired by it, and the world will learn from it and follow in your ways. My father worked many jobs in his life. He was first a Rebbe in yeshiva for many, many years. When the family got too large and he needed additional income, he learned about real estate, and he became a real estate agent. And then years later, he started working for the city of New York for the Board of Education in their real estate division. My father's job was to negotiate the deals for the city in buying school property, leasing school property, selling school property. That was the department that my father was in. That particular department went through many leaders. And the reason it constantly had changeover was because many of the heads of these departments were always arrested and put in jail, because bribery was rampant in the city of New York. And here you're negotiating deals in the millions of dollars. It's very easy for someone to slip you an envelope to go ahead and say, this is the best deal we're going to get, for someone that slipped you some money. My father worked for decades in this department. Was we'd say one of the last men standing, because his integrity and his honesty was known. Everyone knew you couldn't bribe Rabbi Bryski in any type of way. You couldn't buy him lunch. You couldn't bring him a sandwich. My father would say that if it was raining and he was walking on the street. He wouldn't allow the people he was negotiating with to hold an umbrella for him. That's how careful he was. And it was fitting that Mayor Ed Koch, mayor then of New York, gave a special award to my father, an award for honesty and integrity. He learned from his father. He understood being a religious Jew also meant being an honest Jew, that they go hand in hand together. They're not two separate departments. They're one and the same. I heard this story once of a group of kids from a sleepaway camp. They went on a field trip. And for whatever reason, I never quite figured it out. Those of you that have children or grandchildren, you take them to, soon we'll take them to Disneyland, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, wherever it is from the major attractions. And for some strange reason, kids are attracted to that stupid arcade room. So here you'll spend $100 to get through the gate. And after 20 minutes, they're looking for the arcade room and they're bothering you for quarters so that they can play the video games. It's probably not quarters anymore now, it's probably dollars. I was a head counselor and a director in camp for many years, and I always experienced this. You want to know where you're going to find most of the kids? In the arcade room. Not by the Shamu show, not even getting wet in the front 5 rows of Shamu. No, they're in the arcade. In my days, in some of your days, it was playing pinball. Well, pinball is long gone. They're playing a lot of other games that move too fast for my eyes to figure out how to play. Anyway, so this camp counselor took his kids. They went on an outing. And again, kids are in the arcade. So he's keeping an eye out for the kids. Are they behaving? Are they making any mischief? And he knew his campers, who was the rowdy ones, who he needs to keep an extra eye out for, who are from the wilder ones, who are the ones that always get into trouble. So he's watching some of his campers in the arcade. And as he's seeing the scene, a father, not of one of his campers, a father of a child, goes to the register to get change. And a $20 bill slips from his pocket onto the floor. And before the counselor has a chance to go over and say, sir, you dropped the $20, one of his campers takes notice of it, walks by, gives the bill a kick, moving it away from the man who dropped it, and then quietly picked it up and put it in his pocket and walked away. The counselor's watching this. It's happening over seconds. He just saw what just happened. The rowdy kid that he was there really to keep his eye on also saw what happened. He wasn't the one that kicked the $20 bill. It was a different kid in the group. But the rowdy kid saw also what happened. And he saw what his fellow camper did by kicking the $20 bill and picking it up and walking away. Get this. He takes a $20 bill out from his own pocket, walks near where the father is standing at the register, drops his own $20 bill on the floor, and says, excuse me, sir, I think you dropped something. Man looks, says, oh yeah, I must have dropped it. And he picks up his $20 bill, which wasn't really his. It was this other camper's $20 bill. And he takes it and he thanks him for pointing out that he dropped the $20. And then this rowdy kid goes back to play his video games. He doesn't say a word, not to anyone, not even to the camper that took the money. You can imagine the counselor is watching this and he's shocked. He's shocked that anyone would do it, let alone this kid that he thought was a troublemaker. So he calls him over. And he says, I saw everything. Now, of course, I'm going to go back to the other kids soon and get that $20 back and give it back to you. But what made you do such a thing? Kids don't do such things. And the kid said, I'll tell you why I did it. When I was young, I would visit my grandfather a lot. I was very close with my grandfather. My grandfather had a tobacco store. And one day a customer came in, and as he was paying my grandfather at the register, He dropped the bill from his pocket. A kid that was in the store saw this and quietly picked up the bill and walked away. My grandfather finishes the sale, and as the man turns to leave, he takes $1 from the register, ran to the other side of the counter, put the bill on the floor, called back the man and said, "I think you dropped something." And then with a touch of embarrassment, almost in tears, the camper says to the counselor, "The boy in the tobacco store that picked up the $1 was me." And after the customer left the store and I knew now that my grandfather saw what I did, I simply took the $1 bill and quietly walked up to my grandfather and handed it to him. All my grandfather said to me was, "From you, I expect better." That's all he said. "From you, I expect better." And those words have haunted me for years. My grandfather died, he said, less than a year ago. It was a few days after my bar mitzvah. I hope my Zaidi is watching. And I hope after he saw what I did today, he knows I learned my lesson. And he has forgiven me. And he's proud of me. You see, my dear friends, the be-all and the end-all of life should not be to get rich, but to enrich the world. That's our task. And we do so with honesty. We do so with integrity. We do so by being truthful. We do so by being a mensch. And so the first question we're asked when we come up to the heavenly world, did you conduct your business with faith in God? Did you conduct your business honestly? Did you conduct your business with belief that God is watching you? And God is seeing you, and God is blessing you to do the right thing. As Ethics of Our Fathers teaches us, he who is rich, he who is satisfied with his lot. It takes faith to have this mindset, to believe, as the saying goes, that God gives every bird its food. But for whatever reason, he doesn't throw it in its nest. The bird's got to go out and find it each and every day. But it's there. God prepared the food for the bird, but put it in different places. You go find it. You need to find it. God provides for each and every one of us, but he wants our effort. He wants our work, not like the manna in the desert. It comes down and it's right there prepared for us. He wants our labor, our partnership in this. And we have to be satisfied with our lot. Those words, Hasomeach bechelko, he who is satisfied with his lot, only when we learn to be satisfied with what we have, with that which we have been blessed with, will the drive to earn more and more and more calm down. How many people destroy their lives by this constant pursuit of more and more? Someone once conducted an experiment with some processionary caterpillars. These are caterpillars that walk in a procession and just follow the caterpillar in front. So this is the experiment. This is what he did. He arranged in a complete circle around the rim of a flower pot all these caterpillars, so that they're in a complete circle. In the center of the flower pot, he put pine needles, which is the food that they eat. And the caterpillars started doing their march, and they're following the one in front of them. So they're going around the rim, and they're going around and around and around, hour after hour, day after day. For 7 days straight, they're marching around this rim until they all dropped dead from hunger and exhaustion. There was an abundance of food just inches away, and yet they starved to death because they just followed blindly the lead of others. You see, they confused activity and accomplishment. Don't confuse the two. The fact that we put in more and more hours, that our life is filled from morning to night with activity and with work and more work, so that we can purchase more and more toys, doesn't equal accomplishment. It's a path to destruction. We may earn more, but we accomplish a lot less in the truer enjoyments and fulfillment of life. If someone is able to serve God and pray fervently and eat kosher and observe all the festivals, but nevertheless doesn't act kindly to others, then there's something dysfunctional about their religious life. Because if you really love God, then you need to love his children. On the other hand, there are those who erroneously believe that since they're kind-hearted, since they're menschlich, since they're generous, since they're giving, they're exempt from all the other mitzvot. They're exempt from Shabbat. They're exempt from tefillin. They're exempt from kosher. They're exempt from studying Torah. They're exempt from prayer. Also not. God wants not only kindness. Some animals are very kind as well. God wants the kindness that only we humans and Jews are capable of, a divine kindness, an infinite kindness, an authentic kindness. We need to combine both together, the spiritual, living a spiritual life, and a giving life, a caring life. One who is kind and caring and has no spiritual connection may be a very nice person, but there's a vital element missing from them. There is a soul element missing from them, from a purely humanistic perspective. Okay, I am me, and you are you. And we can care for each other, we can love each other, but we're always going to remain distinct and separate. So if I'm kind to you, then it's me going out of my way to be kind to you, because we're two separate people. That's from a humanistic perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, from a Jewish perspective, from a soul perspective, we're all one. Our bodies may be separate, but our souls are deeply linked because we're all part of one divine source. So the kindness I show you has to be as natural and innate as the kindness I show myself. Only when we recognize the divinity which unites the universe, unites all of humanity, all of the people, can we love each other for the sake of love, transcend our egos, transcend our natural instincts, and become a far deeper, purer, more powerful human and soul combined together. All of the mitzvot, all of the Jewish rituals are means to become more sensitive to the soul and begin to live with this reality that unites us, so that the Torah and the mitzvot allow our kindness to become more divine, more infinite, more absolute. And that's the message of Moses. You need both. A religious individual can't bribe God with their religion. Religion is hollow without love and empathy for others. And secular saints can't bribe God with their love. Their kindness would be infinitely deeper if they became more aware of the soul dimension and practice the actions that make it real in our lives. So when someone comes and says, I'm not going to put on tefillin, I'm not doing that ritual, I'm not going to do that, you know why? Because I know a religious person that puts on tefillin every day and they're dishonest in business. So we're going to pick that example and we're going to say, because that person is dishonest and he's religion, then religion is not for me. Now, it's sad that this individual is putting on a show of religiosity and yet is dishonest. I get that. But just because someone does that doesn't mean it's the tefillin's fault. You know, that person eats as well. Are you going to stop eating because a dishonest person eats? Certainly, you're going to say, just because the person eats, that's not what made him dishonest. Well, just because he put on tefillin, that's not what made him dishonest as well. I know you're disturbed by the hypocrisy, but that disturbance shouldn't lead one not to practice themselves. Moses, in combining these two verses, is talking to every single one of us and saying you need to combine both. There needs to be a religious aspect of life that's in the ritual, but there also has to be that human part of us, that we care for one another and that we're there for one another. That's the message of these two verses. We're going to continue in the book of Deuteronomy with Moses' talk next Wednesday, 12:30. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Also, Monday evenings, we're studying biblical reflections. We're studying the stories of the Bible. I'd love to have you join with me Monday evenings at 7:30.